Welcome to this lesson on Pythagorean Theorem. Make sure you have your math dictionary out and are ready to record. We have 4 words that we're going to record today. First one is a right triangle. It's a triangle that has a 90-degree angle. Why it's important is to understand the different words that come from a right triangle. So remember, that's the right triangle symbol. The side that is opposite that angle is called the hypotenuse. T-E-N-U-S-E. And it is always across from the right angle. The other two sides are simple. They're just called the legs. And this is important terminology as we get into our next word called the Pythagorean Theorem, which says in any right triangle, the sum of the squares of the lengths of the legs equals the square of the length of the hypotenuse. Now you've already submitted a proof of the Pythagorean Theorem, and I can put this as in your own words. Well, it's just a squared plus b squared equals c squared, as a right triangle that has a side length of a, b, and the hypotenuse c. So where a and b are the legs and c is the hypotenuse. So when you square the legs, add them together, it should equal the square of the hypotenuse. This one's written a little bit differently, but you can put in Pythagorean inequalities, obtuse triangle. That'll be the definition you're looking up. In your definition, you could say if c squared is greater than a squared plus b squared, then the triangle is obtuse. And you can draw this diagram right here for the diagram. So Pythagorean inequalities, obtuse triangle, that is your word you're looking for. C squared is greater than a squared plus b squared, that's your definition, and your diagram has been circled. The next one we talk about an acute triangle with our Pythagorean inequality. Meaning, if c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, then triangle ABC is an acute triangle. In both of these examples, c will always be the biggest number of the triangle lengths. So it says, find the missing side. We know it's a right triangle. I just drew it in because I forgot to prior to you seeing the example. If this is the right angle, this length opposite, that's the hypotenuse. And if we're using a squared plus b squared equals c squared, it does not matter which one I use as a and which one I use as b. I just need to know that 6 and 4 are my a squared and b squared. So it doesn't matter what order we put it in. It's going to be 6 to the second power plus 4 to the second power equals, I'm going to put x to the second power. And now I just go through and solve. 6 to the second power, 6 times 6 is 36. 4 times 4 is 16. It equals x squared. When I add 36 and 16, I get 52. And now to solve this for x, we need to take the square root of both sides. In our calculators, you're going to take the square root of 52, and you're going to notice it's going to give you a decimal. Well, we're going to round it to 2 decimal places and state that this is 7.21, which makes sense because the hypotenuse is always the longest side, and 7.21 is bigger than 6 as well as 4. Excuse me. All right, find the missing side of this right triangle. Again, always pick out the hypotenuse. Hypotenuse is 17, so that means I'm going to do x to the second power plus 8 to the second power is going to equal 17 to the second power. So x squared plus 8 to the second power, that's 8 times 8, which is 64, equals 17 times 17, which is 289. To get x by itself, we need to subtract the 64 on both sides. And I have x squared equals, we subtract 64 from 289, we get 225. Take the square root of both sides, and the square root of 225 equals 15. So here's the two examples. When you are given A and B and you're trying to find C, you're going to square the numbers and add them together. When you're given the hypotenuse of 17 here, you're going to square that number and subtract it with the square of this number in order to help solve. Let's go on to our classifying. So we need to classify if the triangle is obtuse, acute, or right. So from our definitions, we know that if c squared, where did it go? Okay, if c squared is bigger than a squared plus b squared, it's going to be obtuse. If c squared is less than a squared plus b squared, it's going to be acute. And if c squared is equal, it'll be a right triangle. So we need to establish, well, which one is going to be our c and which one's going to be a and b. C is always the biggest number. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take 13 and square it, in which I will get 169. Now I take 8 squared plus 11 squared and see what we get. So 8 squared plus 11 squared. So that's 64 plus 121 equals 185. And now I establish, is c squared, well, that's 169, that is less than 185. Therefore, this triangle, these three, would be, this triangle would be acute. Let's try two more. We got 6.1, 9.6, 15.6. So if I take 15.6 and square it, I get, you're going to get some decimals here, it's 243.36. Now take 6.1 squared plus 9.6 squared. If you have a calculator, you can follow along with me. We get 129.37. This represented my c squared. Is this number bigger than, less than, or equal to the a squared plus b squared? This number happens to be bigger. Therefore, this triangle I would classify as obtuse. Here's the last example. Biggest number is 25. I'm going to take 25 and square it, and I'm going to get 625. I'm going to take 7 squared plus 24 squared, and that happens to be 625. Notice that both numbers are equal. Therefore, this would be considered a right triangle. Your assignment can be found in the binder. Turn it in when you are finished.